Here's how to load a barbell for the squat, bench, and deadlift. If you're new here, I'm Dr. Alyssa Olenick. I have a PhD in exercise physiology. I'm a strength, running, and hybrid training coach. And today I want to walk you through how to set up for your squat, bench, and deadlift in the gym. In my programs, the Lyss method, we coach a lot of beginners or people who are new to barbell training. And one of the most common things that comes up is, how do I set up for these lifts, or am I setting them up correctly? So I wanted to take you through a video today, just simply walking you through setting up these 3 moves, which are very common for you to see in most strength training programs, or that you can add into your own strength training routine. There should be no reason you should let lack of knowledge or confidence stop you from lifting heavy and getting after it in the gym. So today I want to help you feel a little bit more confident in setting these up and executing them in your own training program. So let's go. First, let's start with the squat. For many of you, you are likely familiar with your standard squat rack, but if you're totally new to the gym, then this is the squat rack. They come in many shapes and sizes, just like many of us, but they're all beautiful, the same, and we love them. So most of them are either gonna have a square, larger rack like this. It will be a rack completely embedded against a wall, or a standalone rack. Most gyms are going to have some sort of rig set up like this with plates and or these bars here. But what you see is you will have these holes all throughout the poles here in most racks in some form or another. And these are for you to adjust and set up the height of something known as the J hook. So this itself is the J hook. It's shaped like a J, so you can see why it's called a J hook. And this is where the barbell sits inside. You will adjust these according to the height of the movement that you're doing. So whether you're doing back squats or bench press, pulling from low, pulling from high, tall or short, you can make it adjusted and work for you. So first, when we're setting up the back squat, we want to put the J hooks in a place where we are able to pull the bar out of the rack in a way that we're not having to get up on our tippy toes in order to do it, or we're not crouched down so low we're having to squat to get it out. We want it to be nice at our shoulder height, so we're able to kind of just lift and back up and take that bar out of the rack. So for me personally, I know from squatting in my own gym, I memorize how high I need it to be. And I know that I need 1, 2, 3, 4 holes up. And this is something that I recommend you do when you're in the gym, whether that is a gym that has numbers on these. Often you will know what number is associated with you. Or for me, I don't have numbers on my rack here at home. So I just simply know that 4 of these up is where I need to set my J hook. Now, this might seem obvious, but you want to make sure that your hooks are on the exact same height on each side. And if you ever get in under a barbell and you realize they are uneven, it's totally okay. We've all been there. You just can take off the weight or pull up the barbell and adjust the hook and then place it back down. It's going to be okay. It's a silly thing that all of us do. So you will see for me, these are just about at my shoulder height here. So the bar will be a little bit below my actual shoulder height. So when I'm pulling it out of the rack, I'm just having to go up a little bit to get it up and out. I'm not having to again tippy toe it and or crouch down too far below it. So next, you'll want to grab your barbell. Mine here has a holder on the side. Many in gyms will have them standing like that, or they will already be in the bar itself. Now, if your barbell is already sitting in the bar like this, when you're getting ready to set up, but you need to adjust your hooks, you can simply take it down, place it on the floor, adjust your hooks to where you need them to be, and then put it back up in there. Obviously, if you're new to lifting in the gym and if the barbell's too heavy, you can start with things like easy curl bars and or ask for someone for assistance to get the barbell there if you need help adjusting it to your height. So as you will see, when I'm setting it up for the bar here, again, it's just slightly above my shoulder height here. So when I'm getting up under the bar, I'm able to kind of get in this and stand up with just a little bit of knee bend to step out and move into my squat. Now let me show you some examples of what it looks like if it's too high or too low, so you can get an idea of how that works for you. Keeping in mind we're all different heights and it's not going to be perfect. These holes aren't perfectly spaced out for every single height increment of a human being. So for some of you, you might be a little bit lower than maybe potentially what I just showed there. I do feel like that could be a tad higher for me, but I feel like if I go any higher, then I'm almost having to go on my tippy toes, and you're trying to split the difference there to have it so you're only having to raise up a little bit to get it out and get it back. So let's show, for example, I'm setting this up a little bit too high. So I'm getting in the gym, I'm setting up for my squat, and I put my bar here, which is above my shoulder height. And in order for me to get the bar out and under, I'm going to have to go up And I'm gonna have to go on my tippy toes to get that out. Now, you can still squat from there. And doing so with just the barbell doesn't seem like it's also bad, but once you start putting a lot of weight on the ends there, it can feel really unstable or harder to then lift that weight up on your tippy toes and get that back out before going into your squat. Now, if you're having to err on the side of too high or too low because some benches or racks are a little bit weird in their jump increments, it's likely a little bit better to go a little bit lower if needed, if you are having to do that extra tippy toe like I did there. So similarly, let's set it up too low to show you what that looks like. I'm gonna put my barbell back here in the rack, and you can see that this is well below my shoulder height here. So in order to get down and get under, I'm having to get under the bar, and I have a lot of knee bend here, and I'm having to basically do a half squat to get it up before moving into my squat. So ideally what you want to look for when you're thinking about the height of where you're setting up your J hooks is when you see me walking this bar, I'm going to do squat backwards. You don't want to actually do that. You can see almost where that bar wants to hit, and then it would go slightly down. And that's a good way for you to kind of estimate where you want to place the base of that J hook so that you're walking into, and then it's slightly dropping into the hook for safety when you're done in re-racking and or unracking the weight. Next, when you're thinking about lifting the bar out of or back into the J hooks, you want to make sure that you're always lifting away from the rack. So you're going to be stepping backwards out of the rack when you're moving into your squat, or stepping into the rack to go back into the J hooks when you're done and re-racking the squat. Like I showed there before and I acknowledged, you don't want to be squatting facing outward. You always want to be squatting facing inward towards the wall or towards the rack. So I've got my J hook set up to exactly where I need them to be, and I want to get ready to go into my squat. So again, I'm facing towards the rack. I'm going to roll the bar to the edge of the J hook here, get under, do my stand up, take my 3 steps out, do my rep, and then I'm going to walk directly back into the rack until I hit it. So you can see that again. I'm going to walk directly back until I hit that rack. Don't try to lower it before you hit that rack. You might miss the J hooks. You might get one and not the other. You want to make sure you're walking back directly into that rack and then lowering and then getting out from underneath this. This will make sure that you have the bar safely racked back into those J hooks. Again, they have that J shape there to help protect you and make it so the bar doesn't fall out on you or to the floor or around you and or anything like that. So you want to make sure you again walk back in and let it sit down. Next, let's talk about the loading of the barbell. Now the loading of the barbell will be similar for most lifts and or movements, but I'm going to show you it here for the squat, and similar rules apply to the bench, and I'll give you some tips and tricks for the deadlift here in a second. So when you're loading your weight to the bar, you're going to be pushing it inwards onto the bar. You know, there's different types of plates. There's going to be pound plates, kilo plates, Olympic weightlifting plates, metal plates, plastic plates, and for most of you, the direction you flip the plate likely doesn't matter. There's some lifting enthusiasts that will say if you have kilo plates and or metal plates, you should be putting the number side in and keeping the flat part out. It really doesn't matter as long as you're putting the weight on the bar. But I do recommend you load them from heavier to lighter plates moving outward. So that would look like if I'm getting ready and I'm going to start squatting for the day, I'm going to start with my heavier sets. So maybe I'm going to put these 25 pounds here on the outside. I'm going to load it one plate at a time so it's even on each side of the barbell. Now, the hooks are made to be relatively sturdy, so if you had an uneven barbell, it's not likely going to just flip out. But if you have a cheaper or less stable rack, it might be harder for it to counterbalance that weight. So it's just a good habit to go with loading them one plate at a time, biggest plate to smallest plate and or heaviest to lightest moving outward. But sometimes we load our plates a little bit silly and they're a little bit uneven, and then that's okay. But I do really like having at least, you know, even plates on each side. I do recommend that. So I have my plates here. Say I just did one of my working sets. I'm ready to add more weight to the bar. I'm gonna go get more plates here on the side. And this time I'm gonna add these 10-pound weights. I'm gonna add one 10-pound on top of my 25-pound here. And then I'm gonna come back around and do the same thing on the other side here. Now, many gyms have these clips. You can get different versions of these. There's ones that you grasp, there's ones that are plastic, there's ones that you crank, and you simply are going to put them onto the bar and lock them shut. Now, Some people use clips, some people don't use clips. Some gyms require you to use clips, but what's nice is that they help hug the plates together so that when you are lifting and going through the motion of the lifting pattern, they are stable and they're not moving or bouncing around. And I would make sure that if your gym requires them, that you are using them. They can be used for safety, for keeping those plates in the bar so they're not moving while you're doing it. But there might be some times where you choose not to use the clips simply so that you can bail on things like potentially a bench press and dump the weight. But with a squat, you can dump that backwards. So you want to kind of put the clips there on the ends so that your plates are nice and snug and they're ready for you to execute your lift. Now, when you're unracking the weights, again, this is going to be similar for most of these, especially the bench and the squat being similar. You will simply take off your clips. You will always put everything back where you found it. We re-rack our weights here, right, kids? So then you're going to take off your plates. Usually I like to do them one at a time. Sometimes things like my 10s, I'll take them off together so it's a little bit easier. Put them back where they came from. And then I'll take off my bigger plates one at a time, re-racking them where they were from. And then you are left with your empty bar. Now, depending on your gym and it's how they're set up, you might just leave the bar right here empty as it is, or you might take the bar and return it to its to its barbell holder or home if it came from another location in the gym, or your gym keeps them somewhere else and not always in the rack. All right, now let's move on to bench. All right, next we want to set up for the bench press. Now, depending on the bench that you're using or the gym that you're in, you might already have a bench that is preset where the bench is already in a standstill rig with J hooks and or hooks already built into the rack, or simply a standalone bench, versus you might have to bench in the quintessential squat rack. This is probably more true for functional fitness spaces in gyms or your home gyms, but similar rules apply here today, other than you may or may not be able to adjust the J hooks based off your own personal preference. So the first thing when it comes to the bench, if you are setting up your bench in a rack on its own and it's not a standalone bench system, you want to make sure that your bench is completely center in the rack. And this can sometimes take a little bit of moving and rolling and adjusting the bench around to make sure that it's not angled crooked or you're not too far over to one side so you're off center below the bar. You want to make sure that it's nice and perfectly center there in the rack. Now, for most of you, you're probably benching in a bench that's already set up, so you might not have to worry about this at all. The next thing we want to do when we're making sure where the bench is lying is you kind of want to make sure that when you're laying, your chest to shoulders right here, this collarbone space and area, is directly under the barbell. Now, my barbell's still set high for when I was demoing squats, but you want to make sure that when you're under that bench, you're going to be able to reach up and have that bar be directly above your shoulder girdle here in the chest. You can adjust yourself back, but my head is falling off the bench here, so I don't want that. And since I feel like my shoulders are a little bit in front of that bench here, I may adjust the bench back just a tad so I'm right there underneath it. And that seems pretty good. You will notice that if you're looking from the side rather than the front, while the bar is roughly above my shoulders, your arms will be back a tad, and that's okay because you will pull the bar forward and then down. But you just want to make sure that you're not reaching super far or pulling back towards your body. You want it to be a slight angle up and then down for that path of where that bar is above you. Next, we're gonna set up the J hooks for the bench. Again, you might have a bench that already has pre-built-in hooks that force you to either lift above or below that comfortable range of motion for you for offloading the bench. And the best thing that I can do is figure out which one of those feels the best for you, whether it's too close to your chest and you're having to kind of half rep before getting out, or if you're just having to reach a little bit, get it out above you, and then adjust your shoulders in position. Sometimes you're just having to split the difference. I know for me, being more petite, those pre-built bars means that I'm always having to lift the bar almost up out of it, then get into position before I'm able to actually execute the rack, or I'm having to basically do half a rep before I'm able to do it. If you could have someone spot you and help you with a lift off on bench, that can be tremendously helpful if your hooks aren't perfectly adjusted. But for those of us who do have the self-adjusting benches here today, you are able to get it in that more comfortable position. Similar to what we covered in the squat already, you want to be in a position where you are having to push up a tad to get it up out of the hooks of the J hook, and then pulling it over the center of your chest before descending down towards your chest for your first rep. But you want to make sure that you're not having to overly extend to get it out or doing that half rep in between. Again, recognizing that not all benches are created equal. So for me, I know where I need my J hooks to be for my bench here, so I'm gonna count. Again, you wanna make sure that both of these are even. You're going to place your bar into the rack here. And again, if you need to take it out and put it back in to adjust your hooks or get set up for the bench, that is totally fine. All right, so I have my bar set up with my J hooks here where I need it to be. I'm gonna get back into my position, laying back on the bench. So I'm here under the bench, and you can see that almost right above and slightly behind my chest height is my barbell here. And then you can see I have a slight bend in my elbows, so my arms aren't perfectly straight. There's a slight bend. I'm gonna roll it to the front end of these J hooks, get my hands right here wrapped around the knurling. You wanna make sure you always have a good secure thumb lock. You're not going above like this, locking it in. I'm gonna do a small press to get it out and descend into my rep and push back out. Then when I'm re-racking, I'm doing that slight push up, getting it all the way back into those J hooks before lowering it down. What you don't want to do is just put it back and assume that it's going to land perfectly in those J hooks, because what you can do is you can again get it, you can get it where one's in it and you're in a tricky position with your bench, or you miss the J hooks and then you're coming back down onto your chest. So you want to make sure again you're slamming and in. Now I'm slamming here to be a little bit of extra dramatic here for the demos of the video. You don't have to be that clunky in the gym, but you can just make sure that it's going back all the way into the hook before lowering it down, so you know it's going to safely sit back in that J hook before you're doing that. Now let me show you what it looks like when it's too high or too low, and or how to adjust for that if you're in a gym where you have to bench like that. So I'm gonna raise these up just one more, so they're just a tad too high for me. Now these are a little bit higher than what they were just for me just now. So I'm gonna get back into that squat position, and I'm gonna have to, I've seen my arms are completely extended so that if I was gonna go to that bench, I can't even pull the bar straight out of the J hooks. So if I was forced to bench like this in a gym, what I would do is I would kind of relax my shoulders and get up and push it, and then get into my good bench position in that more stable position that it's easier to be in, do my reps, and then push out to return it back into there. But if you are able to manually adjust yourself, you can see that ideally you wouldn't be able to just push it out like we did before, and you would want to have it be a little bit lower so you can execute that bench in a more comfortable position. Similarly, we'll do it a little bit too low. So I took this a few pegs lower than what it was from even my comfortable bench position. I'm gonna get back into it. And if I was in a bench rack where I was forced to do this, I would do a similar thing where I would just kind of get into my bench position, adjust, and then carry on into my reps. But this is how you can tell that it is too low for me. My elbows are really bent. I'm almost having to do a half a rep before I'm even getting it out of the bench here and lowering it down. So simply, if you're able to adjust, raising it up a little bit more, or if your bench is forcing you to lift from a lower position, getting into that position that is comfortable at the top of that rep before then going into your working sets. Again, sometimes it's safer to err on the side of being a little bit lower if you're not able to rack it safely and comfortably and confidently, being high, just so that way you can get it back into those J hooks if you start to fail a rep or it gets too heavy. But if it has to be too low or too high, it's also nice if you have someone who can just simply lift up and lift off the bar and hand it into that place for you. So you can always ask a friend or someone friendly in the gym to help and assist you there. Now, if you did skip ahead and skipped past benching already and want to know how to load the bar for the bench, it's going to be very similar to that of what I showed in the squat. So go ahead and rewind back and watch that. But there's a few additional tips specific to the bench that I want to make sure that you know and or can help you with that. So similar to what we talked about with the squat, you're gonna load it largest to smallest plates. So we're gonna just put these 10s on here to show you that. But for many of you watching this, especially I know I have a larger female audience, you might be working with something known as change plates. Now, you have these big major plates, but you might notice that there's these tinier little plates that you will see in the gym, and these are called change plates. Now, I have Olympic weightlifting specific ones. Often you'll see 2.5 to 5 pound ones of these in the gym, and they simply go on the outside of your larger or major plates to add smaller weight jumps there in the gym. And so I wanted to make sure that you know how to load these and what these look like because you might be working with these and or using these in place of some of these larger weight jumps if you're new to benching. Now, bench press is one of those moves where clips can be more optional in a more beneficial way. So for many people, if you're benching alone or it feels like a safety hazard, you don't have a spot, you might choose to forego clips on your bench. So that way, if you're ever in a position where you are compromised in the bench press and you're having to bail and it's stuck on your chest, you can just dump the weight out and put the bar back. Now, make sure you follow your gym rules for that. But if you're training alone or in a more functional fitness space, like a CrossFit box or similar, and or you don't have a spot for a bench, you may choose to forego clips. So that way, if you are in that position, you are able to bail that. But again, make sure you're following your gym's safety rules, and or always having a spot is sometimes better than being stuck under a bar itself. All right, last but not least, let's move into the deadlift. Now, the deadlift is a lot more simple to load and unload than maybe the squat and the bench because you're not having to deal with the hooks and adjusting for all of those things. But I will give you a few tips here today specifically to help make sure that loading and unloading is a little bit easier for you. So when you're loading the deadlift bar, you're gonna start with it just flat on the floor. And you're gonna want to load the plates again, one at a time on each side, and it will raise that up. The biggest thing that you want to think about when loading the deadlift that a lot of people do as a mistake as beginners is that they will start with smaller plates rather than larger plates like the ones that I have. And if you notice, all my plates are the same circumference, even if they are smaller weights. So if you're training in the gym and you are unable to load your barbell with wider in diameter plates, even if you need lighter weights, consider elevating that up off the ground. Now, I don't have risers here today for this video, but I'm gonna have my video guy give you a clip here from one of my demo videos in the Lyss method of how to do an elevated deadlift if that is your situation. But I'm gonna load this today under the assumption that you have these larger plates and you are able to load it up off the ground. Similar to the bench and the squat, we're gonna simply go and get our plates and load them heaviest to lightest one at a time. So for the deadlift, you are going to be able to simply take that bar at first and slide that plate into that position here. Now, obviously 45s might be heavier, heavy plates might be heavier. So just be getting into that comfortable position where you're able to slide that on there for yourself. Similar, coming back and doing it on the same side over here. And this time you might just want to find that hole with your plate and then pull it forward on to the barbell. Now, obviously this is a lot easier said than done I'm using 25 here to demo. With heavier plates, you might need to just get in the position where it's easy to adjust that and pull that on. Now, when you're loading additional plates onto the deadlift, there's a few things that can make it easier. One, you can just manhandle it and just kind of yank them and push them on if you want. More often than not, that's the choice that I'm making. Some gyms have lifts or jacks that you're able to put under the bar that will raise up one side at a time, so it's easier for you to get the weights on, especially after that first weight. I'm gonna give you a little quick tip here if you have none of those options. So if you're loading the barbell and you need help getting plates onto the end of that bar and you need a little bit of a boost with that, you can simply take one of your little change plates and put it underneath it and roll that plate onto the top of it. Then, when you're loading your additional plates here, it's really easy and you can just slide that on to that and roll it back off. You can then take your plate and do the same thing on the other side. Now, if you're loading multiple plates at a time, you can simply load one side and the other. The barbell, it's kind of fine to load the one side versus the other if you need to. It's not going to really go anywhere. And then you can just move this to the side for when you need it, when you're unracking your plates. Now you wanna make sure your plates are really snug there against the back of that bar. And if they are moving around or gapping, you might simply opt for your clips, especially with the deadlift, which moves a lot while you're lifting it. You might wanna clip it on so that your plates don't slowly inch out towards the sides during your lift. As you can see here, now that it's set up, my barbell is almost at that mid-shin height, which is where we want it to be, versus if you were to use those smaller in diameter plates, it might be a little bit too low for setting up and executing your deadlift. So once again, opt for the larger, more rounded plates if you can. And if your gym doesn't have those in larger sizes, think about elevating it for you to be about that height that it would be if you did use the larger in diameter plates. Last, we want to think about unloading the deadlift bar. So you have a few options here, and you can either just reverse what we just did or do the one side offloading, turn it over technique that I personally love to use myself. So you can do the way that we just talked about here, but in reverse. Roll that up onto here, take off your clip, and unload your plates nicely, one at a time. Personally, the technique that I like to use is I like to unload my plates one side at a time, put them back, and then I like to take my other side of my barbell and simply take this like this, raise it up, let all of those plates fall to the ground, take my bar out, put my bar back where it came from, or that's in the rack, leaving it on the ground, and then clean up and put my plates away. And there you have it, my friends, how to set up your barbell for your 3 main lifts, squat, bench, and deadlift in the gym. If you found this helpful, go ahead and send this to another friend who's a beginner and might be struggling with this as well. Some of these things are questions that so many people have, but they're too embarrassed to ask because they feel silly or stupid not knowing how to do these things. And trust me when I say there's tons of people in the gym who just learn this by doing and going along the way. So I hope this video gave you a leg up in your confidence and getting in there, getting your barbell loaded, and getting after it. If you enjoy this video, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any other future tips and tricks. And otherwise, I will catch you on the next one. Thanks for being here.